you missed the first two segments, you missed a lot of in-depth analysis on this fiscal cliff. Head on over to the web, www.dlblain.com, and we'll post archived copies of the show if you missed the first two segments. Also, I forgot to give out the phone number. Our number is 252-633-0107, and our email is allthingsmoney@dlblain.com. Of course, we welcome our viewers and listeners' input to the show. And if you forget that or don't have a chance to write it down, just remember dlblain.com, all our contact information, archives of the show, and we'd love to hear from you. So we're talking in this show about this fiscal cliff. We talked about the four main things that are set to happen in 2013. Expiration of the Bush tax cuts, expiration of the payroll tax cut, the new health care reform taxes, and the spending cuts. They're all scheduled to happen automatically if Congress does nothing in 2010. The best estimates from the experts out there is this will cause the U.S. economy to lose about 3.5% of GDP growth, or GDP growth will decline. GDP will decline 3.5%. I'll get it out. GDP will decline 3.5%, throwing the U.S. back into recession. So the topics talked about to avoid it, of course, are some sort of compromise. It looks like on the tax cuts or the tax increases, they'll probably compromise to only increase people $250,000 and up in income, and some provisions $1 million up. The spending cuts are another issue that it's going to be a lot tougher for a compromise to occur on these spending cuts. The Democrats are insisting on implementing the budget agreement of last August, which is about $2.1 trillion in cuts over the next 10 years. And the Republicans are actually seeking cuts in addition to those that have been agreed upon. But at the same time, there's also some bills out there to not cut the defense spending, to shift it to other things. So there is some uncertainty. The rating agencies have already said that if they do not enact these proposed spending cuts, that they will cut the U.S. debt rating once again. So that's not good. And the president is sticking fast to the compromise, saying that they must take effect. We talked a little bit about the lame duck session, the possibility of what's going to happen with the lame duck session, with all the uncertainty around elections. The point of all this fiscal cliff, the election cycle, the market's going to remain volatile throughout the end of the year. They're often very volatile up to election and calm down after the election is over. However, this year the volatility may actually increase after the election due to the uncertainty about how Congress will address these cuts. So that's my take on this fiscal cliff right now, of where we are and what we have looked forward to for the next year. Okay, I thought we've got our problems here. I thought it would be useful also during the last several minutes here, this segment, to talk about what's going on in Europe and talk about what is known, what is unknown, and things like that. So first of all, Greece. Talk about Greece. Greece is really spiraling out of control, and there's really no good outcome for Greece or the Eurozone. The arguments over Greece is these austerity cuts and creditor demand for these austerity cuts have run into a big political roadblock. If you haven't been following, some of the political parties are just saying no, and the country's political system is fragmenting, social unrest is increasing, and while there may be a way for Greece to remain in the Eurozone, an exit from the Eurozone is a distinct possibility. And in fact, some of the major global banks have already developed plans for a return to the drachma. Second thing, so that's a known. A lot of problems in Greece. Second thing, it's not just a Greek problem or a Eurozone. Across the world, all countries are trying to de-lever in a controlled way while maintaining growth and jobs, and it's a very difficult problem. But the Eurozone's institutional challenges make it even more difficult, where at least in the U.S., whether you agree or don't agree on the way it's going, you only have one country to manage. And so in the Eurozone, Germany's balance sheet is definitely the strongest. Italy and Spain are not technically insolvent yet, but they certainly are having a hard time maintaining stable debt dynamics. In fact, over this past holiday weekend, we saw some serious problems develop over in Spain. So that's the second thing. It's not just a Greek or Eurozone problem. There are problems around the world. Third, the Eurozone's monetary and fiscal interventions have not succeeded in stabilizing its sovereign debt market, partly because they've been reactive and because of the public discourse between the European leaders, Merkel in Germany, and the other leaders. And so, unlike the U.S., where it has somewhat stabilized things, in Europe, the central bank's stabilization has not really worked sufficiently yet. Fourth is that the Eurozone's challenges are really political and not all financial. That if you look at the debt ratios and things like that, the health of the banks, they're really not any worse off than the U.S. But the challenge is coordinating among the countries and in the region, and governments trying to overcome the disagreements on how to equalize the risk that is involved between the different countries. Of course, the smaller countries have one thing. Germany has another plan of action. And so it's clear that the Eurozone status quo is probably not sustainable. We're running out of time. Maybe next week we'll continue talking about this subject, but what I want to illustrate is the four things that are known about the Euro crisis, and next week we'll get into some of the things that maybe are known unknowns. These are what we call known knowns, that Greece is really getting out of control, number one. Number two, it's not just a Greek or Eurozone challenge, that all over the developed world there are challenges. Three, the Eurozone's monetary and fiscal interventions have not really worked. And fourth, and most importantly, it's not just a fiscal and monetary problem, it's a political problem. Well, that brings us to the end of our show today. We'll see you again next week.
The proceeding was a paid program. The opinions expressed are not necessarily those of WNBU and Inner Banks Media.